my speech to inform, and today I will be speaking about the psychopathology of serial killers. So, to a lot of us, it's a mystery how someone can want to kill other people and how people even have the need to kill other people. To us, normal people, it's a foreign idea to us. I'm not sure if you've heard on the news recently, but there was a murder in my own hometown, Milpitas, on October 5th, which was about 2 months ago. Danica Bascos was brutally murdered in her home by her ex-boyfriend, Kevin Van Nguyen. That's Danica Bascos, and that's her ex-boyfriend. He is now being sentenced. Of course, it just happened 2 months ago, so he hasn't received his sentence yet, but he is going through with the courts. So Nguyen isn't necessarily a serial killer since he's only killed one person, but he definitely shows signs of being a psychopath because most normal people don't just murder people, So the first step in understanding the psychopathology of a serial killer is to determine what it takes to be a psychopath. So Richard Gray, the author of Psychopathy and Will to Power, described psychopaths as having a lack of a conscience, the lack to feel compassion, and the lack to feel remorse. So, as I stated earlier, the definition of a psychopath is those three things: the lack of conscience, compassion, and remorse. A psychopath's lack of conscience, it makes it extremely difficult for them to decipher between right and wrong. The conscience, as most of you know, is a little voice in our head that tells us, the difference between if we should or shouldn't do something. And so Harvey Clerkley, the first scientist to frame our current understanding of psychopaths, described them as affected by somatic dementia, which means they lack the ability to make emotional and moral connections to other human beings. Psychopaths are genetically incapable of feeling human emotions such as love, guilt, sorrow, and so many more emotions that we all take for granted. The lack of compassion that psychopaths tend to have often makes them seem to be anything but human to us. By no fault of the person diagnosed as a psychopath, they cannot make these human connections that the rest of us are able to make. More often than not, psychopaths are capable of pretending to be normal. They even may tell you that they love you, but the words love mean absolutely nothing to them. Psychopaths desperately try to fit into their surroundings so you won't see them as a monster, which they think they are. Their ability to imitate human emotions is remarkable. They do not want you to know how different they are, so they blend in very well. Most psychopaths tend to lead normal lives. They have families, friends, and careers because they're trying to fit into the rest of society. And although they try so hard to be normal, deep down they are really different from the rest of us. From a very young age, we are taught the difference between right and wrong, but to them, it's very hard for them to distinguish the difference. And to us, it's very black and white, but to them, it's all gray. They don't know. They know what society depicts as the difference between right and wrong, but to them, there's no difference. Oftentimes, we tend to see psychopaths as murderers and monsters, although only a small percentage of psychopaths are actually end up being serial killers. According to a study done in 2011 by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, about 1% of the entire population are psychopaths. And so there's 7.3 billion people on Earth, and that means 1% means that 73 million of us are psychopaths. So that means a lot more of the people that you know may be psychopaths than you'd think. The next step in understanding the psychopathology of a serial killer is to determine exactly what it means to be a serial killer. So serial killers can come from all different backgrounds and demographics. And the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, describes serial murder as the unlawful killing of two or more victims by the same person in separate events. So in order to be considered a serial killer, according to the FBI, one must kill two or more people on different occasions, separate occasions. So, for example, if I were to kill one of you right now, I'd have to wait till tomorrow to kill another person, in a different place. So that would make me a serial killer, two or more people. So I'm sure you've all been waiting for me to mention some names of some serial killers. And one of the most infamous serial killers is Ted Bundy. he seemed like a very average white male in the 70s. He even graduated from Washington College, and he even got a letter of recommendation from the governor of Washington to go to law school. And he had a girlfriend in college who was a white female with brunette hair, and he actually raped and murdered over 30 women that were all white with brunette hair. So, you know, sometimes distinct things in people's lives can lead to that break in their mind. You're not always necessarily born as a psychopath, but there is a chemical imbalance that has to be there for that distinct thing to happen to influence you to want to kill people. So human beings tend to be very intrigued by serial killers. We watch so many different shows and movies and Netflix series that focus on different serial killers and crime investigations. Some of my personal favorites are Criminal Minds and Dexter. So Criminal Minds is a television series that follows the BAU, which is the Bureau of Behavioral Analysis Unit of the FBI. And the show is actually written by Jim Clemente, who was actually a real member of the BAU. And it's a very action-filled show that represents the difficulties that come along with solving murder investigations and catching serial killers. It's a really interesting show. Another one of my favorite is, as I said, Dexter. He is actually a serial killer who is considered to be a vigilante. So he kills bad people. He kills other murderers and rapists. And from a young age, his father could tell that there was something wrong with Dexter, so he taught him a moral code, because most psychopaths and serial killers don't have that moral code already instilled in them. So his father decided to instill that in him at a young age, even though that's not how Dexter really thinks. It's just what he's been taught. So the fact that we are so interested in shows like this and real cases of serial killings is because we are so foreign, because serial murder is so foreign to the human mind. As average human beings, we don't get pleasure from hurting others. Most of us don't get pleasure from hurting others. And we all have moral codes that don't allow us to believe that things like rape and murder are okay, like they are to psychopaths. The last step in understanding the psychopathology of a serial killer is to examine the brain activity that actually makes a psychopath a serial killer. So serial killers have very distinct psychopathology behind their brains. Daily Mail wrote an article on the brain imbalances that psychopaths tend to have. So here's some images. They stated that psychopathic behaviors seem to be linked to an imbalance in brain chemicals, according to a new study. Swedish researchers discovered that people with psychopathic tendency also had high levels of brain chemical responsible for aggression. And also in a study done by King's College, London, in August of 2009, the brain differences in psychopaths were examined, and the researchers claimed that dysfunction of the alamogada, which is an area associated with the fear and aggression, and also the dysfunction of the frontal lobe, which is the area associated with decision making, were extremely different in psychopaths than they are in normal brains. So this means that psychopaths are typically born with flaws in those parts of their brains that are associated with emotion, fear, aggression, and decision making. Psychopaths are born with defects in their brain that make it fairly easy for them to fall into the path of a serial killer. So with their lack of emotion, fear, and increased aggression, it is no mystery why they have a much higher chance of becoming a serial killer than the rest of us. So the psychopathology of a serial killer is strongly correlated with their actions. Psychopaths have the tendency to be emotionally disconnected from the rest of the world due to their lack of conscience, their lack of compassion, and their lack to feel remorse. The brain activity does not guide them to have feelings of love, affection, and empathy for others, and the reason that some psychopaths turn out to be serial killers is because they do not have the same moral distinctions between right and wrong that the rest of us normal people do have.
Any questions from anyone for Asia on our topic?
Actually, I didn't know about the Milpitas incident. I also live in Milpitas.
You weren't around? Yeah, that happened 2 months ago.
Yeah. Thanks for telling.
Is that all?
I had a question and now. It actually has to do with what's going on today with a lot of the things, all these mass shootings and stuff. Would you say that with the research that you've done, these numbers that you've given us and how people aren't born this way, where would you stand in the information you've given us with regards to these people that have done these shootings?
I would say, like as I said in my speech, there's a lot of brain imbalances that these people are born with, but the way that they choose to present themselves and the way that they choose to take action in their daily lives is up to them. So, you know, the mass shootings and stuff, I don't think that they can necessarily blame their chemical imbalances in their brain, because we all have things that are wrong with us, and that doesn't mean that we're going to act on those fantasies and things like that. So the fact that they do act on those fantasies, I wouldn't say they should be able to blame their brain. I think that, you know, that's a decision that they make on their own.
Okay, so they should be held accountable. It
Yes,
shouldn't be
definitely.
like a plea of insanity or something like that.
In a lot of cases, yeah.
Okay, all right, great, thank you so much.
Thank you.